All right, well, welcome to the Scrum Master Power Hour. My name is Patty. I am excited that you're all here for this amazing conversation that's about to happen. I started this meetup a little over a year ago with the idea that I wanted to support new Scrum Masters. And new is a very generic term. We're always learning. But what I saw was a huge gap between getting a certification and actually learning how to quote unquote do Scrum and step into that Scrum Master role, build those necessary skills. So I'm here to support you. I started my own company called Agile Mindset Consulting a little over 4 years ago. And my goal is to support folks like you. I do Scrum Master coaching. I do Scrum simulator training to help you build those Scrum skills. And I also go into companies and help them with their Scrum Master training and evaluate their agile transformation. Because as you know, it is a journey and we all need to kind of hold hands, so to speak, and help each other on the way. So a couple of announcements before we get started here. I am working on lining up all the Fireside chats for the rest of the year. So I have 3 out of 4 people set up, and it's one time a month. So I'm very excited that all these folks are willing to come here and share their goodness with you. And one of them here is Arlin today. In 2 weeks, we will be having a conversation around one of my favorite topics, building trust on your team. And it's with the lens of one of my favorite books in the whole world. Does anybody know what that book is? I've often said it is the answer to every job interview question. And feel free to put it in the chat if you know, because you've heard me say this, or you'd like to take a guess. No guesses. All right, I'll just drop the bomb. The 5 dysfunctions of a team. If you have not read this book, I mean, it was life-changing for me. I suggest you read it over any other book, Scrum or Scrum adjacent. But we will be having a discussion around this book in 2 weeks, and I hope that you all can make it. And of course, if you cannot, it will be recorded and sent out for posterity. All right, well, let's get started. We're all here for the man of the hour, Arlin Avery. Arlin, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself.
Yep.
And then I want to kind of backtrack and talk about how we know each other. Mm-hmm. And that will kind of launch us into some of the really cool things about you that I'm so excited for you to talk about. So start with who you are, what you're currently doing, where you work, what you work on, etc.
Okay. Well, I'm Arlin Avery, husband of 1, father of 2, currently based here in Cincinnati. And I work for a company called PatientPoint. So I'm a software engineer and test there, working on the Sales Cloud team, which is Salesforce. So what I normally do is, right now, I'm just coding and building test scripts for our regression and just testing the product. So I've been doing that I've been at that company for a little over 2 years, but I've been in the QA space for, this is coming up on year 10. And then overall IT experience has been 14, 15 years. So I love what I do. I am currently an aspiring Scrum Master. So I'm hoping to take that leap pretty soon here. But yeah, QA has been a pretty rewarding, I would say, career. It is a career. It's a lot of people really don't look at it that way, but it definitely is a career, just as a software engineer, a business analyst. So just in a nutshell, that's who I am. That's what I do, and that's how long I've been doing it.
Wonderful. As I said last week, and as I've said in the past, this starts out with me asking you questions, but then it kind of turns into a conversation, and then we forget other people in the room because we just start talking about things. So, yeah. Feel free, folks, to turn your cameras off. That's totally fine. But Arlin and I have, I have talking points. I have questions that I want to ask him, things that I want to cover. But like I said, this is an organic conversation. This has not been rehearsed. So kind of whatever comes out, comes out. So I'm excited to see what that is. And again, if you have your mics on, please go ahead and put them on mute so we can make sure that we can focus on our conversation here. So Arlin, I want to back up a little bit.
Yep.
And I want to talk about how we know each other. And I'm obviously always thinking about this because we've been interacting a lot over the past 6 months or so. But this is a pretty cool story. And maybe you remember when we first met, because sometimes, people come to this power hour and they've been coming for a while. And it's not until I have that first call with them that I realize this was like our moment, right? So I don't know how long you'd been following me or showing up to this group, but you started showing up to the power hour. Do you remember when that was?
Oh my goodness. This was probably around March of, I guess, actually it was this year. It was earlier this year. And then I believe you and I connected on LinkedIn. And then just based off of your content, I pretty much already knew what kind of person you were. And then the things that you were posting daily and all of that. So I liked the content. And then it was just like, okay, I'll join the Scrum Master Power Hour because, like I said previously, I'm an aspiring Scrum Master. And I'm actually kind of on my way of stepping out of the current role that I'm in and getting into that Scrum Master role. So I figured it was just something, I was like, I'll just try, to go this. You go to these meetups, sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not. But the meetup that the Scrum Master Power Hour that I went to at that time that you were hosting, I forgot the woman's name who was the speaker, but her and I connected as well. But it just seems like it was very helpful in helping me get to where I want to go to next. So then that led to the X factor. What is your Scrum superpower? So from the Power Hour led to the X factor, which I'm like, okay, this is awesome. So it was the one-on-one time with you and I, Patty, and we were talking, and then you were just really bringing stuff out of me that I really didn't know that was in me, as far as it pertains to not only my current role, but into the role that I'm aspiring to be. So the Scrum Master Power Hour, and then it goes to the X Factor, and then my Agile superpower was Silo Buster, because of all the information that I gave you from the experience that I had from the past, and then in the present. It was like you came up with the term, and I was like, you know what, and it just stuck because it was just something unique and something that I haven't heard of that term before, based off of the information that I gave you.
Right. So let me fill in some of the gaps here.
Yep.
From my perspective. And, like if I embarrass you, I embarrass you, but like,
it's okay.
This is going to come out. So yes, you had come to the Power Hour and then you showed up at my X Factor workshop.
Yep.
And one of the things that I've talked about on LinkedIn a lot, and something that helped me step into the Scrum Master role, was to figure out what I brought to the table that was unique, that people maybe didn't know. I didn't think it was a big deal, but in talking about it, people are like, wow, that's pretty cool. So mine, as you might have seen, or one of them, is called the Trello Ninja. And I created this workshop to help other people draw that out of them. So Arlin signed up for that workshop. And I think there was, some miscommunication about the time.
Yep.
So we ended up doing the first session as a one-on-one, right? And then you showed up to the rest of the group. But in that one-on-one, this was like fate. That's the way I see it. I was so impressed by you and so impressed by this X factor of a silo buster. And it was for a number of reasons. Number one, yes, that is something a Scrum Master needs to work to undo. But the cool thing is you were a software tester. And historically, those folks, in my experience, have been in a silo and they've not wanted to bust out of it.
Exactly.
They're very comfortable in their, and again, this is just based on my experience. I can't speak for everybody. But what I've noticed is that historically, Scrum Masters have to pull people out of their silos, encourage them out. And you're like, this is what I do as a QA engineer. And I thought that was so cool. And it was you and a couple of other folks that I was talking to at the time and that were in that workshop. I was like, the group of you are incredible people. You've got to be in my Scrum simulator. And as some of you probably on this call know, I don't go in people's DMs and cold call them and hit them up and like, you got to join this thing. Like, I don't do that. I put the content out there and I want people to come to me. But I couldn't, like, the group of you was so awesome. I just couldn't help myself. So I said, you all have to do this. And this was the April cohort that just closed. Yep. And it was a few weeks ago, one of the people, and I'm not going to say names, but said, how did you bring us together? How did you bring this awesome group of people together, Patty? And do you remember what my answer was?
I can't remember, actually.
Well, it was so ridiculous at the time and it came out of my mouth, but I'm like, no, this is serious. It was magic.
I remember you saying that.
What I said to you folks is and you just said this before, I put this something out that attracts certain people. So when I bring you together and I take you through the Scrum experience, it's like magic happens.
Definitely.
And the last thing I want to say, and then we'll get into some of this other stuff. I'm like, I want to own this, Arlin. I do, right? Because like Karen last time, I own stuff. So we were on what was our second to last call, right? And I was like super nervous. I've been thinking for months, I'm like, this guy has got to come to my Fireside chat. Like I got to ask her. I was like nervous, right? Because I didn't know what you were going to say. So you got on the call early, right? And we were waiting for everyone. And I just like blurted it out.
Yeah.
Like, so like not cool. I'm like, Arlin, I want you to do this. And you're like, what?
But to be honest, Patty,
myself.
Yeah, to be honest, and it seems like we're just having this conversation, but I know we're in a group. But really, to be honest, ever since I joined the only the Power Hour and then the Scrum Simulator, I've really broken out of my shell and comfort zone. And I'll give you credit for that, because at one point in time, and even being in QA, you're in a role where sometimes you're on the other side of the wall, right? You're in this little group, maybe 5 to 6 people, and people are just really throwing stuff over a wall, and you're just testing, and that's really all you're expected to do. So really, even being in that role, and then with the interactions of you, it's just like I'm a whole new person now when it comes to this and the work that I do and the different approaches that I take to it, even in my current work and then going forward. So I actually, applaud you for that.
No, I mean, it did kind of come out like it blurted, right? And like, I wasn't sure what you were going to say. But like, I want to ask people to do this because I think you have an amazing story. And that's why I brought you here. I didn't want you to say no. So like I was nervous, but the cool thing that happened, this is why I said this group was magic, because we were talking and then somebody else said, this was much later in the meeting. And I'm not going to say names, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
Said, Arlin, you need to do Patty's Fireside chat. And I said, please tell him that I did not pay you to say that. Because the thing is, Arlin, you've noticed that you've come out of your shell. I know your wife has. I have, obviously, because I'm the observer of all of this magic.
Yep.
Like the other people in the group are calling you out on that. So she brought that up and she didn't know I asked you.
Yeah, it just happened, just like you said, magic. It just all came together.
Right. So with all of that being said, through this experience, like I said, I wanted to bring you to share your story. And getting to know you over the past 5 or 6 months, whatever it's been, we've built this relationship, right? And I've built this relationship with all the other folks. And I want to make this point because I've talked about this before. It is building relationships with people over time that will help you get the job. Definitely. It will open the doors for you. Now, I will say, I don't have a job to hire you for. I'm a a Scrum team of one. I'm a business of one. If I had a job, you would not have to interview. As far as I'm concerned, all of you have been interviewing. Not really, but this has kind of been like showing me what you can do, that if I had roles available, I'd hire all of you. And this is the type of thing, like, you have to show up to mentors and to other people, because they will see this and then they will make the phone call and say, you got to hire this guy, or you got to hire this girl. Like, I've been working with them for 6 months. And yes, this is not a quote unquote job, but in my mind, you've just been a Scrum Master and everything else for 4+ months.
Yep.
So like, I will speak to you and everybody else if you need a reference. Anyway, let's get into the other stuff here, though. I just wanted to make that point. So your X factor of Silo Buster, like I told you, I thought that was so unique for your role.
Yep.
Can you talk to us a little bit about why you decided to start doing this silo busting? Like, how did you take this on? And can you give us an example of something you've done to do that?
Yeah. So like I mentioned previously, traditionally QA is kind of like that group that sits in the corner all together or on the other side of the wall. They're really like the final frontier, the forgotten group in the team, but they're a very intricate part of the team. So this whole silo buster came when there was an issue when we were having with requirements when we use user stories, and they weren't as clear. And then we were just kind of faced with all this basically mess, trying to figure out, okay, what needs to be tested, what's some of the functionality that's going to be changed. And we would be spending like a week just to figuring out these requirements. And I was just like, well, there's a whole team over there that writes the requirements that we normally don't even really interact with. So I was like, well, if we're having this problem here, which is the requirements, and we're figuring out what the tests, and we're writing test cases and all of that, and they're coming from this group over here, why aren't we collaborating? So that was the key thing. So I had this is when we were before COVID, we were still in the office. So I just went over to where they were sitting at, and I said, hey, this is the issue that we're having. Why don't we schedule a meeting together and we can go over some of the questions that we have, some of the group, and just some of the things that we've been having issues with in the past releases. And then the guy kind of looked at me, it was just like, I guess he really wasn't used to a QA person kind of really taking on that role or asking those type of questions. So we had the meeting. It was about an hour long, and then we got everything fleshed out, and we were able to help them. They were able to help us. And then it actually helped the QA team get the releases out quicker. We were writing the correct tests. We were writing, the scripts to actually cover the functionality that needed to be covered. So from there, it was like I joined it was a group of BAs, the BAs and the QAs together, and we actually had this standing meeting I think it was every other week, where if there was any questions that QA had, we were able to, ask them, or if they had any questions, vice versa, if they needed to come up with scenarios, if they were doing like their Gherkin, their behavior-driven development, we were able to help them with that, come up with different scenarios and test cases that they may not have thought of when they were formulating it. So that was the bridge. And then the director seen what was going on, and he just like, wow, like what happened? What's going on here? Like, what, you guys are having this meeting, and they're just like, well, Arlin is the one who suggested the meeting. And I was just like, okay. So I bridged that gap between the group who writes the requirements and actually the team that tests the requirements and use those requirements to create their test cases. So that was like a huge thing. And even also other things like speaking to the director of product development, just going up to him and giving him ideas and really collaborating with him. And then everything trickled down back to the QA team. So now they're really viewing the QA team as an asset to the team and just not a group of testers, which sometimes in the prod dev, if we use the word tester, that's kind of a negative connotation almost stuff. That's kind of how it comes across sometimes. But yeah, that was me just really becoming like a quality coach on the team, on the QA team. And then I believe even my manager I don't know if he got angry with me because he felt he was getting overshadowed by me just kind of just going out on my own. But I was just really in that position to manage up. And then just, it was an issue that I seen, it was an impediment. And I was like, this is the way we would resolve it. And I just went ahead and did it.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And we'll touch on your manager in just a second, because as you were starting to talk, I was thinking, like, what was the initial response to this? Was there resistance, right? And you brought it up, right? Because there always is going to be people that don't understand what is you're doing. You're going outside the normal realm of typical behaviors at your company. So people might get upset or frustrated, and it's good to have a conversation with them, and be able to, right, feel comfortable doing that, like building that relationship. But, what the other thing I was thinking about as you were talking, and this was, I think, something I was posting on LinkedIn earlier today, there's always this concept of somebody coming in and forcing Scrum on a company or forcing Scrum on a team. And whether you're doing Scrum or not, whatever, but the fact is that you're moving towards something that's not these siloed, passing it over the fence. So you got to start somewhere and make the move somewhere. And if you end up saying, oh, let's try Scrum, or let's start going all the Scrum events, or, whatever it might be, maybe that is a step that happens, but you took that first step saying, hey, can we just meet and talk about this?
Yeah, and it actually influenced other teams to do the same. So there were multiple QA teams, QA groups that really were having the same issue. And I spoke with them and said, hey, this is exactly what we did. So you may need to get with this group, or whatever group you're having an issue with where the work is coming down. You may need to just collaborate more. But it's really just having that courage and taking that first step. And then sometimes we may get scared because it's like traditionally these two groups didn't work together. But once you take that first step, it's like, oh, well, I need you and you need us. So let's just work together. And then that's what happened.
Yeah. And if you feel comfortable talking about it, I mean, can you talk about the resistance and how you handled that? Whatever you want to say about that, because I know it's like you're talking about other people and.
Yeah, so the resistance, it was, like I said, traditionally the two groups didn't work together, and it felt like maybe I was stepping out of my normal role, my normal boundary. So they were just like, well, you're QA, we really don't work with you guys, which is kind of crazy that I'm kind of thinking that now and listening to myself, but it's just like, but we actually need each other. So it was just really having that conversation with the manager of the BAs at that time. I just said, hey, look, this is the issue that we're having. This is the way that I believe we should be able to solve it. And it just started with a simple conversation in an hour meeting. So there was, like I said, there was the resistance at first. It was just like, well, but then once we presented what was the issue, and then how the issue, once it's resolved, how it could help the entire team and ultimately the entire organization, then that's when the wheel started rolling a little bit more from there. Once they seen the value that, hey, the issues that they're having, once they're resolved, then there's so much value, not only for the QA team, but there's a trickle down and there's also a trickle up as well. So once they seen, okay, the value in it, then they were like all on board. But like I said, at first there was that resistance, but once it's like, okay, that there's value in this. So then it was just like, okay, we're on board.
Right.
Yeah.
Gosh. Resistance. That's like the name of the game all the time.
Yeah, and it wasn't comfortable because, like I said, just stepping out of my role where I'm just testing, creating test cases, and flipping statuses back and forth through Jira, and that's really the only communication, or you're communicating with someone on Slack, and they may be on a different floor than you. That was a difficult conversation to have, and it was just me myself. I just took the courage and just had the conversation, and it worked out perfectly.
Right, and I think that sometimes, whether directly or indirectly, people tell people to stay in their lane.
Yeah.
And that's hard because, and I've posted about this on LinkedIn as well, like thinking of yourself as a culture disruptor. And like, that's a little sting of a word there, right? But you're there to kind of hold a mirror up and say, is this culture working?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not working, what can we do to take steps to change? So that is disruption, even though we don't like to use that word. And that makes people very nervous, but that's also part of our role as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches.
Exactly.
So,
and just having those uncomfortable conversations, and because a lot of people, they don't like change. So once I had the conversation, there was some process things that we had to change. And people were like, well, we've worked this way for 5 years. And it was just like, well, the way is not really working, as you can see. So yeah, that was a huge win for not only the QA team at the time, but also for the organization.
Right. That's the way we've always done things. How's
Yeah,
that working
exactly.
for you?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Before we are going to get into some technical stuff. So I do have some
Yep.
technical questions, because I know there's probably questions on what's the difference between a QA tester, a QA engineer. So we'll get to that. I do want to talk about two more other things, because I think this first one is going to be huge for a lot of people on this call. The concept of transferable skills. Now, I mentioned in getting to know you over the past 5 or 6 months, you know, and everybody on our cohort, we realize how much value we bring to our job that we learn outside of our job.
Yep.
And in hearing some of your stories, I was like, wow, you're a Scrum Master already, right? But so I want you to talk a little bit about some of the things that you do outside your day job. And like, sometimes we have, I'm not asking you to stretch and make it Scrum Master stuff, because sometimes we feel like we have to do that.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about the things that you know that you've done, and maybe you continue to do them. And these are direct ways for you to develop your Scrum Master skills. And you can pick one or two, or whatever you want to do there.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm actually a deacon at my church. So for those who may not know what a deacon is, it's really an ordained servant in the church. We handle from the business stuff to the finance stuff to maybe, you know, serving communion or something like that. So really, and then we interact with a diverse group of people on a regular, right? So I'm around different people. I'm actually a mentor to some of the teenagers at the church, and then I'm also involved in the Adopt a Class program as well. So we go to 4th grade classrooms and we do activities more so on a STEM level, and with some of the kids in a lot of the underserved and overlooked communities here in Cincinnati. So and then I've mentored from really grade school, middle school, and high school kids. So and then I do a lot of volunteer work in the community where I'm at. So I may deliver meals to elderly couples, or like an elderly woman or a widow or someone like that. So just having those type of interactions, knowing how to interact with people, having that empathy for maybe some issues that they're having, knowing how to listen when they're having, you know, some issues or they just want to talk to someone, and knowing how to not be, you know, reactive, just really listen, really being proactive. And, you know, helping them and being really intentional about the words that I say. So I've been in those mentor roles. I've been in the coaching role, a teacher. I do some teaching with the Bible study group in my church as well. So really using all of those skills that I've used in the community, I've used at church, I've used in my family. I'm a big role model. A lot of the younger family members look up to me. And then just taking all of that and mixing that all together and applying the personal values that I hold dear to myself, and then just really looking how I could apply that to at work. Because, and I believe I told you, Patty, it's just like you can't have it just kind of like one way. If you talk the talk and walk the walk at work, you need to do it outside of work as well. Because I made a post on LinkedIn about the correlation between a father and a leader. Like you can't be the best leader at work, but then just be the crappiest father at home. Like it has to go together. So having those, and then we have to live out these Scrum values, right? We have the 5 values that we have to live out at work, but we also have to do it outside of work as well.
Yeah. And our cohort, we've had a lot of conversations around that. And I am a very big proponent, and I talk about it all the time. You've got to walk the walk.
Exactly.
You can't just talk the talk, because people, whether they're consciously aware of it or it's subconscious, if you're saying something and doing something else, that makes you untrustworthy. And when we talk about building trust on a team, they have to trust you, and they have to trust you quickly. and you have to, get people to talk to you about very sensitive, scary things for them, and guide them and coach them out of their comfort zone.
Yep.
It takes trust as a Scrum Master and a coach.
Exactly.
So
and then stepping in that Scrum Master role, you have to be like, with the trust, you have to be authentic, because a lot of people can pick up on if you're quote unquote faking the funk. Basically, they'll say that's not it, right? They'll call you out, right? So you have to build that trust. You have to walk the walk, and you have to be authentic at work and outside of work.
Yeah. And it's a journey. It's a personal transformation journey. And I've been on this journey for a long time. I started studying yoga in 2011. Gosh, it's like I had to think back how long that was ago. And I've been on this journey since then. Self-awareness, this is all emotional intelligence. So it's not something to shame yourself over or beat yourself up over. It's always like iterative improvement. So yeah. Okay. Before we get into the technical stuff, last thing, because I think this is super cool. One of the deliverables, one of the user stories you did in our cohort was around sprint goals. And you were so passionate about that. And again, kind of like your silo buster thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, what? And again, this is like, putting QA in a pigeonhole, right? Because like you said, off in the corner, throw the thing over the fence to them. What QA engineer talks about sprint goals and talks about them passionately and guides their team to doing that?
Exactly.
So like, I want you to talk about where this came from for you.
Yep.
And what effect this has on your team, especially that you do it, right? You've taken that role on.
Yeah, definitely. So as I started to really, I guess, study Scrum, and then realizing, okay, with sprint planning, you need to have a sprint goal, right? So I was like, well, we're somewhat doing Scrum at my current position, but we're not doing any sprint goals. So I researched on the importance of having that sprint goal, which is creating focus for the team, making the work flexible, where the developers could be a little bit more creative with their work, and it just guides them along the path of that sprint, and creating that potentially the shippable increment, right? So I was like, well, we're really not doing that at work, and then I seen the value in it for us to have it. So we had a sprint planning session, and then at the end, they're like, okay, everybody, we're done, and we're about to get off the call. I'm just like, hold up, what's our sprint goal? And then it got really silent, because they're like, how is this QA person asking about a sprint goal? And I think the Scrum Master at the time was kind of like, oh yeah, we need a sprint goal. So there's that kind of, you're stepping out of your boundaries, and it was kind of awkward, because they're just like, oh, like, I guess I was supposed to ask that question, but the little QA guy is asking it. So I was like, well, what's our sprint goal? So we started doing sprint goals. And then one of the admins, the developers on my team, him and I had a chat. He was just like, by you bringing up those sprint goals, this actually helped us with the work and knowing the value of the work that we're doing. Because before, it was just like this, kind of like this sprint gumbo of just work. It was all over the place. He was like, but just by you bringing up the concept of sprint goal and us getting sprint goals, now our work is we're more organized. We know what we're working towards. We see the value of our work. So we're a little bit more excited about the value that we're producing, because we're seeing how it's helping our stakeholders and our customers, and how it'll bring back value to the organization and the company. So that I'm just like, well, this is a thing that we're not doing. So we need to do this, because just something that small could have such a big effect, not only on our team, but also the organization. And then the ultimate goal is making our stakeholders and our customers happy. Yeah.
No, that's great.
And just from a sprint goal, all that happened.
Right, exactly. No, sometimes it is challenging, because you're bringing that up and it's like, oh, whoops, did I step on somebody's toes?
Yeah.
Right. And as long as if you have trusting relationships with the people on your team, you can have a conversation around it, and you can say, I'm sorry, or whatever, right? You can kind of work through it. But it is, again, challenging, because you're pushing the envelope and you're trying to push something that has not been done before, but you know the
Yeah,
value. Yeah.
exactly. And then I've really just been pushing myself to just do what's right. And it's just like, if I see it won't just benefit, well, just to benefit me and then the team and the organization, then I'm going to do it. It's just, I can give the analogy, like if you're walking down the street and you see an older lady getting attacked by a dog, are you just going to walk past, or are you going to do the right thing? So I really have taken on that philosophy in, with work, even if it's having that uncomfortable conversation, or if you're like, well, I hope I don't step on anybody's toes, but at the end of the day, you did the right thing. So you should be able to sleep and live with that, that action.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at our time. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like 6:11 already. I'm looking at my list here. So I do want to get into some technical stuff. And I know we
Yep.
want to have some time for questions and answers. So can you give us, just so people understand, like you talk about QA being in this corner by itself and people throwing stuff over the fence to you. Can you talk very briefly in like as non-technical as possible, what the software development lifecycle is and where you and the folks around your role fit into that?
Yeah, definitely. So the SDLC is the software development lifecycle, the life cycle of creating software. So you have different phases you have planning, you have analysis, design, implementation, execution. And then from there, you have like your exit criteria, which is making sure your definition of done is met. And then from there, you have reporting at the end. So really, traditionally, if people look at the SDLC, they really just see QA as being part of the kind of like the maybe the design and execution. They really don't see them a part as planning and the analysis and doing all of that. But as many organizations that I've worked in, QA has been a part of the entire process from the beginning to the end. Because when a QA person is in planning, they can create test cases. They can, from based off of the requirements and then the design review and then your design discussions, they're able to create tests right then and there. So once we get to that implementation part or the execution part, we've created a slew of tests that we can execute based off of a planning session we were in. And then a lot of people, that have these companies, these huge organizations, they may not even have QA. So they really don't even see a value into it. But that's really where QA fits in the SDLC, is they fit for the entire cycle, not just in one phase of it.
Yeah, and yeah, there was somebody that I was trying to mute. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I've worked on teams where QA again was this like group of people over there, right? And they weren't involved in any of the things before it got to them. And then they were left saying, we don't know what to test. We don't know what we're looking for. We don't know what this is supposed to do, right? And it creates, and then, I mean, it just kind of goes around and around and around. And it's like, if you get them in the conversation early, like everybody, right? That's why everybody has to be in the conversation up front.
Definitely.
Then everybody's on the same page. So by the time you get the deliverable, you know what you're looking at, so to speak.
Exactly.
I think the other challenge that I've faced is, working at like big corporations, and I'm trying to like figure out like, how do I say this? Because again, you don't want to talk about companies or people or whatever, right? So it's like, I want to be mindful of that. Let's just say the development takes like 4 or 5 months, which is a lot to begin with, right? And then they throw it over to the QA, right? And sometimes at the last minute. And it's like, we just need to rush and get this done. Just test it, like test your little buttons, and then, we'll release it in 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea, because the folks that are designing and building it don't really understand what you do. But then it's like, once it was thrown over the fence, then it takes another 2 or 3 months for QA to test it. And I was like, wait, what? Why does it take them 2 or 3 months to, what's going on here? And, I just started talking to folks, and then they show me their big Confluence page of the giant flow chart with like 50 gates.
Yep.
Right. the flow chart with the little triangles with the arrows. And I'm like, no wonder it takes you 2 months. And anytime a mistake happens, nobody can figure out what happened. Everybody points fingers and says, I didn't do it. I have no idea, no accountability. And then it's like, okay, well, we're just going to add 3 more gates, thinking that's going to solve the problem. But that's another 3 potential places of error, right?
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask you, like, what's the solution to this? But like, there's so many challenges. And I think bringing QA into the conversation and examining the process as a whole, like beginning to end, to understand why this takes so long and how can we improve this to get the value delivered faster.
Yeah,
Have
definitely.
you seen
And
what I'm
then,
talking about? I don't know what the size
yeah,
of your company is, but I'm talking about like stuff I've seen at big corporations.
yeah, definitely. Because if a lot of these big corporations, at first, they really don't even understand QA and what they are. So they really don't they really don't understand the value that a QA quality assurance person could bring, or even a group. So that's kind of where we would basically need to start, is they need to really realize the value, because QA is just as valuable as a software engineer, as a business analyst, as anybody on a Scrum team. They have just as much value as the next role. So, and then come to find out, there was a team at my current job, and there was a lady on a different development team, and she's just like, Arlin, I'm not involved in none of the planning. I don't go to any of the, she wasn't even involved in the retro. Like they just really shunned QA all the way out. So every time she would just give me a call through Teams, I would just kind of coach her, saying, you need to really step up and say, hey, I need to be in those planning meetings, in those meetings up front, because this is what happens when we get down the road. I'm just given something to test, and then it takes 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm finding all these bugs, and then management is complaining about, why aren't we doing this faster? And it's just like, well, if you included QA in the beginning, then all the kinks would have just kind of got worked out as the process went on. So that was something that I did for her. And then there goes QA stepping out of his boundary again, coaching. And then I really call myself a quality coach. I had my review with my manager just earlier this year, and I said, I'm more of a quality coach than anything, because I'm mentoring and coaching all of these other QA people on these other teams, and they just come to me for questions, and I'm just like, okay, this is what you need to do. Hopefully that'll work, but you may need to figure it out how you want to word it, but this is the first step that you need to make.
Yeah, it is like a Pandora's box, right? And we're only talking about one role here. But
Yeah.
You see why first of all, I was passionate about getting here. I'm like, you got to talk to people about this stuff. But I like to bring in people that are like not Scrum Masters and have them talk to you, meaning the audience, about their role, so they understand what the other person deals with and can see things from their perspective. So
Definitely.
this is like incredibly valuable. Before
Yeah,
we get to questions, because now we're at 6:19, we talk forever. Can you, again, on a very high level, as non-technical as possible, explain to us the difference between a QA tester,
yep,
a QA analyst, and a QA engineer?
Yeah, so
Some of us, they're all the same darn thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then technically they kind of really are. It all depends on the company and how they word it, because sometimes a company can, for instance, if they put a job posting up for a QA analyst, they're really looking for maybe an automation engineer, but the reason they put just QA analyst is because they don't want to pay that person an engineer salary, right? But the difference is you have your QA tester, which is more, they're really not creating test cases. They're just kind of getting what's fed to them, and then they're just going through one by one. They may have like a test charter, or maybe a group of tests where they're just kind of going through manually and clicking and doing that, and doing some verification validation work. More so an analyst, they're really looking into the requirements. They're creating test cases themselves and executing them on that side, and working a little bit more with the business, and getting the things that QA needs towards the end and in the beginning of the testing lifecycle. An engineer, which that's the role that I'm in, they're more so looking at the kind of like the code, digging into the code, scripting out different automation scripts for regression. So for those that may not know what regression testing is, it's really testing to make sure that existing functionality still works when new changes are introduced into the build. So we're more so looking at, okay, what can we automate? And then by automate, meaning, some of the manual tests may take, you can have a test that takes 2 hours. And then if you automate that, you can make that thing run in 5 minutes. So you can get a little bit more of the continuous feedback when you have like your CI/CD pipeline built that way, which that's how we do it at my job now. So it's really kind of, there's levels, but some companies really see QA, they see QA as just one thing, but they can be different based on the company, but they also could be the same. So an analyst could do automation, and then the engineer could do manual testing. So it all depends on the company, but just at a high level, that's kind of like the partitions of each role.
And I am cracking up because this sounds very familiar, like Scrum Master / project manager, or Scrum Master / product owner.
That's how they they kind of play the trick on you when they're posting these, like, if I'm looking for a QA analyst job, they're just like, well, you have to know how to code and all of this stuff, because they just want to pay that person based on the average salary of a QA analyst, right? That's how these companies do it. But like I said, it all depends on the company. But there are differences within those 3 roles.
Right. All right. Well, thank you. I was saying to somebody early today, that was very like answer, non-answer. Like, that's what coaches do. No, but and I'm making a joke, right? But yeah, that is what companies do, right? They're trying to hire for multiple things. They're like, well, we need somebody that can do this, but we also need them to do this little bit here. So we're going to shove it in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Arlin, this has been amazing, as I expected it to be. I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. So I'm going to, I guess, just ask, if you have a question for Arlin, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll kind of scroll through the faces and I will call on you. So Christiane, hey, thanks for your feedback on my newsletter, by the way. Arlin, does it mean you as a QA were not invited to the daily scrums? This is good. So can you clarify? You had that one meeting, right? And then what happened after?
Yeah, so I actually have been involved in the daily scrums because I guess they just wanted our report on how things were going, but still not, there's a lot of times where we weren't even invited to the planning. So they're just like, yeah, we'll just have QA at a daily scrum just to kind of figure out and know what they're working on and what they're doing. And then from there, just like nothing else kind of mattered at that point. They're just like, well, we'll just get you these user stories over when they're ready for testing, and you can just test them yourself. So there, in a way, we were invited to some events, but then some of the events we were excluded from.
Yeah. And that can be frustrating. But as I always mention, it's a process, right? Get your foot in the door, get something there, show your value, then things will incrementally change.
Yeah.
And the patience that it takes, and empathy.
Definitely.
Is so necessary. All right, let's go to progress. What is one way we can help the QA bottleneck? Oh, this is a great question.
That's a good one. This is a good one. So it just starts with a conversation. Why are we having, well, what's the issue? What's the holdup? So, because everyone looks at QA as, oh, they're the ones that hold up the release, or what's the bottleneck? Because sometimes the bottleneck isn't really QA. It could be something else, but it just looks like it's QA, right? So it's really just having that conversation and saying, hey, what's needed? Well, first, let's just focus on what the issue is. Let's just identify the issue and then just work on ways to resolve it, and just really having that conversation and then just really trying to help out as much as you can. And then allowing that team to be, of course, self-managing in the work that they do. But a lot of times that bottleneck isn't really QA. It's kind of like a facade, really. And then a lot of people blame QA because, the release went out late because of QA.
They don't get what you do.
Exactly. They don't really get it. So it's really, equipping yourself and educating yourself, and then having that conversation and asking those questions, and even asking the questions to maybe other people outside outside of the group that how can we help QA in removing this impediment or removing this particular bottleneck. So it all, like I said, everything, it seems like everything starts with a conversation. You just have to have that courage to take that first step and have the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the other things that I often hear about is, this is on my list over here, unstable testing environments.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to somebody that doesn't understand what you do and what that even means, they might just be like, well, can't you just like turn it off and turn it back on again?
Exactly.
Or like charge the battery? Or what's the deal with unstable testing environments? The testing environment is down, right? I hear that all the time, but I think people don't understand, like, you can't just wave a magic wand. Can you just very briefly like address that? Because it is sometimes seen as a bottleneck.
Yeah. And then speaking on unstable testing environment, sometimes it's out of QA's hand. They're just like, this is just the environment that has all of our test data that we run our tests in. But if it's down, it's just like, we can't even do our work either, the same as maybe someone else. So sometimes it's just really out of our hands when we're relying on if there's like some DevOps group or like an implementation group that maybe handles or hosts these different testing environments as far as on the server side. So it could just be a hardware issue actually, which is out of QA's realm. So when it comes to that, but it just looks like on the surface, it looks like it's QA. But if you really start to dig deep, it's kind of like an iceberg. You see that tip, but it just gets bigger and bigger as you dig deeper.
Root cause analysis.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't think she's on the call, but you know who I'm talking about. These root cause analysis story for our group. Anyway, all right, let's see what else. So at 6:27, we probably have time for a couple more. I think you talked about this, but go ahead and answer this again. Do you plan to stay in QA long term or pivot to something else?
Currently, I'm trying to pivot to being in that role of a Scrum Master, right? Just really taking the skills that I've learned over the past 10, 15 years, technically work, professional work, and personal work, bottling all of that up, and then just applying that to the role of Scrum Master. So I've been doing QA, like I said, for 10 years. 2012, 13 is when I transitioned from, and I was on Todd's team, which Todd had mentioned before. And then I transitioned to QA around that time, and then I've been doing QA for 10 years. It's been rewarding. I learned a lot, technical and non-technical. But I'm at that point to where it's like, all right, what's next in my career, right? What can I use going forward with all of the skills that I've learned from the past? So that's where I'm at right now at this current time.
Yeah. And you're ready. I mean, I think that you're there. So it's just a matter of,
getting over the hump.
Taking the next step. And I'm gonna be like, message you on Voxer saying, the whole team, do it. Okay, so here's the last, I know there's a bunch of things in here, but I think this is a good one. Michelle, if QA is heavily involved in creating definition of done and software engineers are adhering to that definition of done, is that inadvertently taking their role away from them once definition of done is established?
I don't think so. I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around this particular question.
Michelle, do you want to clarify or give some more details? Are you available to do that?
Yeah, so it's just something that's come up in conversations with and I'm a new Scrum Master. I've only been doing it for a month. And it was just a conversation that came up with some others that had me thinking as I'm getting to understand the roles and things that everybody does. And in my teams, the developers do their builds and then they send it to QA, and QA does their testing, and then they send it back and that kind of a thing. And they don't have a definition of done as of right now. And so I'm wanting to at some point implement that and help them create that. But if they're coming up with a definition of done, and obviously QA would be very involved in coming up with that definition of done, if they come up with a really good definition of done and they're adhering to that, then aren't they kind of doing that QA piece in the process of their developing? And then if they are, does that inadvertently render the QA, without their job, their position?
Yeah, it actually doesn't, because, and I'm glad that you brought this up, because I was thinking about this earlier today. A lot of people, a lot of companies that may not have a particular dedicated QA group, they have their software engineers or whoever, they do their own testing, right? So that runs a risk, though, because a lot of developers don't have the mindset of a QA tester. So a developer can develop something, it can go from A to B and it can go to C, and then it works perfectly, right? But as a QA person, you have the mindset, well, what if can we go from A to B, and then can we go from C to A, then can we go from B to A? And you have all these different scenarios that actually would be real world scenarios that a customer would do, but the developers only developed it to go one way, and then QA has that mindset, it could go multiple ways. So I wouldn't necessarily say it would take away from QA. I would say QA and developers and the entire Scrum team, that's more of a collaborative effort when producing that definition of done. But having that particular QA mindset, it is kind of we call it a separations of duty. So at the position that I'm in, or the company I'm in now, developers aren't allowed to do their own testing. QA has to test it, because if they don't, then we risk getting that's a red flag as an audit. So we have to have those separations of duty. So I wouldn't say it wouldn't necessarily take away from them. That's why we would need to have that particular separation, because of it runs risk. We run the risk of introducing bugs and all kinds of issues if developers are testing their own work. Because if they're testing their own work, they're not going to find any issues, because everyone thinks, oh, I'm the best developer, so nothing could go wrong. But in fact, it is wrong. So, so if you need clarification or whatever, I hope I answered that question for you.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I know exactly what you're talking about, right? And again, I don't know everybody, I don't know everybody's experience, but I have seen what you're talking about, Arlin. The developers, in their mind, they do A, B, and C, and the customer is going to do A, B, and C. But to your point, QA tries to do all the things that a customer might do, that erroneous things, right?
Yep.
That you might not expect. And you have to account for those things in your software as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, it's like, I write my email newsletter. I'm going to own this. I write my email newsletter every week. I read it 100 zillion times. I'm not kidding you. I send myself a copy of it along with all of you, right? I put myself in my own email newsletter, and I'm like, oh, there's a spelling error in it.
Yep.
Right. You just miss it. And it's like, it's not intentional. And I'm trying my best, but the 10 times that I read it and edited it, I missed it.
Exactly.
And that's what happens with everybody in every job. Anyway, I know that we're over time. I want to be respectful. I know you're what'd you say, a husband of one? I love that.
Husband of one,
Amanda,
father of two.
Amanda called that out.
I've seen that, Amanda. I laughed at that, Amanda.
That was
That's
amazing
funny
to say that. So creative. Anyway, any closing thoughts before we sign off here?
This was wonderful, Patty. I mean, this is a wonderful, the Scrum Master Power Hour is so helpful for people either are new to being Scrum Masters, or even seasoned Scrum Masters, or those who are transitioning like myself into the role. This is an amazing group of people. I know some of you I'm connected with via LinkedIn, and this my son just busted in the room. So, and Patty, I don't know, is it okay to put my LinkedIn information in the chat if people wanted to connect with me and maybe continue the conversation?
100%.
I already sent you a request. So.
Oh, nice, cool, nice.
Well, thank you so much, Arlin. This was amazing. I'm so glad that you agreed to do this, that we were able to talk about all these great topics, and you gave everybody a new perspective some of the things that they might be experiencing at their current position.
Nice.
So yes, this will be, the recording will be cleaned up. I will email it out to everybody on Monday, along with my email newsletter. So please take a look. And like I said, in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And then, like I said, I do have other Fireside Chats folks lined up already. I'm not making any announcements, but the person that's coming next month, I think a bunch of you know him. He's active on LinkedIn. So I'm excited to have him. I'm sorry?
Homework, read the book.
Homework is to read the book. You have 2 weeks. And it's like a story. And as I tell my Scrum simulator, July, are you guys on the call? I got to stop using the term homework. It's action item. Your action item for the next 2 weeks is to read this book. It reads like a story and it is super awesome.
Okay, sorry.
All right, folks, we got to go. We got to let people off the call. Thank you so much. I'm going to go enjoy my dinner and like marinate in this goodness, and I will see you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks for having me, Patty.
Yep, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, Marion.
Like always, thank you. Bye-bye.